just wait as people gather up.
That's
Thank you
great.
everyone for
Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Arnie. See, we have a few people already joining on Instagram and YouTube. That's where we're going live at the moment. Right, let's begin. Let's get started. So, hello everyone. My name is Ish, and I'm joined with Sal. And today we'll be discussing medical cannabis and drug driving. So, to first introduce ourselves, we are PatientsCann UK, a non-profit medical cannabis patient organisation aimed at raising awareness, educating the masses, and normalising cannabis as a medicine. In today's session, we'll be going over Sal's experience being stopped on the roadside, what the outcome was, and best practices for medical cannabis patients to be better prepared and more confident in similar situations. So, the purpose of this session is just to provide confidence, clarity, and so you guys are more prepared. Um, if you have any questions, please do drop your questions in the chat. We have opened up a Q&A on the YouTube channel, and for those on Instagram, please try and hold off your questions until the end so we don't lose them in the chat. So let's begin. Sal, if you could explain to us what happened and how did you deal with the situation?
Thank you, Ish, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. So yeah, it was quite an interesting experience. I was at an event with some friends, and I will be transparent. It was an unlicensed music event, so perhaps not an event I should have been going to. But I did see it as a good harm reduction opportunity to try and raise awareness of medical cannabis, because I want to do that with everyone. And I was also a popular choice to come along because I make a good designated driver, or so I thought. So anyway, we went to this event, and then on the way out of the event, they had police checkpoints checking all vehicles. So there wasn't any kind of concerns around my driving or anything at this stage. So I pulled up next to the officer, and initially they did a breathalyzer test, which I scored 0 for. And then they said as well that we'll need to do the swab test. And I said, that's fine, but just so you're aware, I am prescribed medical cannabis, so there's a very high chance I will show up as positive for cannabis on that test. But nevertheless, they instructed me to go somewhere else. I pulled up, where I then showed my medical cannabis, and after that, they had the swab test. You have to wait 8 minutes for the test to come back. So during this time, they also decided to do a field impairment test, to see if I am impaired by drugs or not. Because remember, they hadn't seen any evidence of impaired driving. So they sometimes will look for other things to see if there's an indication of impairment. And when I look back at the notes, actually, the reason for doing the field impairment test was because I appeared nervous and shaky, which for context isn't surprising. I've had anxiety for years. I've had some negative police interactions in the past, and that's why I'm prescribed medical cannabis. But nevertheless, I complied with the orders, because they're separate offences if you refuse swab tests and so forth. So carried out the field impairment test, and I don't think I did very great. Like I say, that's not because of any impairment through drugs. In fact, I had some medical cannabis about an hour beforehand, but maybe if I had some before the test, I would have probably not been as nervous and shaky, and I might have done a better job. But the officer's assessment, kind of after the test, was that I was impaired, and there were a number of different factors that they looked at to make that judgment. There's a standardised test that officers need to be trained on, and they have to follow, looking at things such as your pupils, the size of your pupils. There's a balance test. There's a walk in a straight line test. All of that kind of stuff. And I will admit it was a bit of a struggle to do those tests. So unfortunately, the officers did decide to arrest me, which wasn't ideal. Of course, being the designated driver as well. So they took me down to the police station. I was there for quite a few hours waiting before eventually I was asked to do a blood test, which again, although I've said I'm a medical cannabis patient and I will likely be over the limit and positive, they still wanted to do a blood test, and again, refusing that as a separate offence. So provided my bloods. And then a few hours after that, I was released from the station. They gave me my medication back. And then eventually, several hours behind schedule, I was able to drive back home. So yeah, that was quite an unfortunate experience, but I do sympathise in some ways because of the nature of the event I was at, and there is a lower bar for arrest compared to, say, charging or prosecution. Um, but anyway, that was in at the end of March, 2024. So I notified work and so forth that I had been arrested for drug driving, just so if anything did come up, everyone was aware. And I was temporarily suspended as well from my driving role pending the outcome of this. But my management and work were very supportive, which was a great situation to be in because they were sympathetic to the fact that I am a prescribed patient. I know plenty of people in that situation where there's a good chance they could have been suspended or worse if they said they'd been arrested for drug driving, but I was lucky to have support there. But yeah, quite a few months passed, and they charged me to be brought forward within 6 months, and the 6 month date was approaching, and the closer it got to that date, the more nervous I was getting. Because although I felt that I'd done nothing wrong, there's always a chance that a charge will come through. Sure enough, about a week before that 6 month window, I received the charge documents through from the CPS. I'd been charged with driving whilst impaired, Section 4, and driving over the limit of THC, Section 5A. My blood reading was 3.6 micrograms. The limit is 2 micrograms, so virtually nothing. But nevertheless, I was over the amount. Now, of course, I wasn't worried about either of these charges personally, although it's not to say I wasn't worried. It is a stressful experience, but I knew I'm prescribed medical cannabis, and I've got a statutory medical defence, that's Section 5A3, so that's covered. And I knew in myself that any perceived impairment in that test was down to my nerves and anxiety, and that I was fit to drive in myself. So I wasn't too worried, but court is always a daunting prospect anyway, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get legal aid for cases like this where there's no prospect of a jail sentence or so forth. That's not to say there aren't severe consequences even without a jail sentence, but it does mean that it's very difficult to get that legal aid for a solicitor. And if you want to instruct one privately, it's not cheap. To do that either, outside of my price range. But fortunately, I'd worked with an amazing person, Guy Coxall, over time in the medical cannabis space, and I knew they had lots of great success on lots of driving cases for patients. So I reached out to him, explained the situation, and Amazingly, he agreed to support with the case. I know a fair bit about medical cannabis and the laws and so forth, but when you're in the firing range, it's can be difficult to concentrate and put down a rational argument to then defend yourself in court. So having that support was very useful. So got together a number of reports around driving, put together a defence statement, got a nice bundle together ready for court. And then we turned up to the magistrates' court. Had to travel down from Devon to attend and stay overnight, but unfortunately, we didn't actually get to have the court case the first time round because there was a personal issue with the prosecution, so they couldn't attend. So the case was adjourned for another date. So waited several more months. Bearing in mind, I was arrested in the end of March, 31st of March 2024. The second magistrate's case was set for the 17th of October 2025. So a good year and a half later. But nevertheless, we turned up the second time, travelled down again, and this time the case was heard, trial went ahead. And again, I set out my defence in terms of the impairment element around my anxiety and other elements as well that contributed to that perceived impairment. Because the prosecutor needs to prove beyond all reasonable doubt that you are impaired and that the impairment is due to the medical cannabis. And I was asking the officer who was the witness, prosecution's witness, is there any possibility my anxiety could have contributed to my presentation? And they couldn't comment on that because they're not medically trained. And again, they didn't have any evidence to suggest that I was impaired through medical cannabis. So the Section 4 bit was put aside, but there was still the element of Section 5A. And me, I thought this would be the easy bit, being a prescribed patient. But when they were cross-examining me near the end, they raised a couple of issues that threw me off guard. The first one was the fact that Schedule 2 medicines are prescribed for 30-day supply, and I had been using the medicine after 30 days. So they raised issue with that fact, and also they raised issue with the fact that the medication was a week or two past the expiration date. Now, I did try to raise a couple of things to counter that. Firstly, the fact that there's no law that I'm aware of that you must use your medicine within 30 days. That's guidance for prescribers and not a law for patients to follow. Similarly, for expired medicines, there's no law against using medicines post expiry that I was aware of, although it did get me questioning myself. I also showed them a travel letter I happened to have for all of those medicines, which was dated the 11th of March till the 18th of March, 2024, which was after the so-called 30-day cut-off period. And in fact, also the end of that was after the expiry date for the medicine in question. So I did try to raise the fact that if it's unlawful for me to use this medicine past 30 days, and I'm not allowed to use it legally, then why am I being given a travel letter to go abroad with this medicine and use it abroad past the 30 days if that's not permitted? That doesn't make sense to me. Despite raising these points, I was unfortunately found guilty on the Section 5A charge of being over the limit of THC. And I was banned from driving, fined, and very shocked, to be honest, because, and Guy was very shocked as well, actually, because, like I said, I was a prescribed patient, so I wasn't quite sure what happened there. So we started doing some research into this around the 30-day rule and expired medicines, and it kind of, our views were confirmed that there isn't a law around this, and it's kind of clinical guidance. And Guy started looking out for clinicians who could confirm this point, and we had the amazing Umesh Chauhan from Special Pharmacy writes a letter clarifying the law and the clinical points around 30-day prescribing and expired medicine, and that neither of those things are unlawful and they're just clinical guidance. So that was brilliant. We had a letter to clarify things, had all of my documents in my clinic, had a letter as well explaining that it's not uncommon to use medicines past the 30 days and from my clinic at the time. So I had everything together as far as I could see. And again, the key point is that the prosecution need to prove beyond all reasonable doubt that I can't raise that statutory medical defence and that I am committing an offence. They need to prove that. But nevertheless, I had plenty of evidence to innocence, submitted that to the CPS in the court, and about a week before the case, received a letter from the CPS saying that they're not going to accept any of that evidence and that we would need a professional witness to attend the court. So with only a week to go, that was a bit of a panic, but amazingly, Umesh agreed to appear as professional witness by video link at the Crown Court and answer any questions thrown at him. So that was fantastic, especially on such short notice. He booked the whole day off to support me there. So yeah, we turned up to the Winchester Crown Court, 10 o'clock trial at courtroom 7. A nice bundle of documents, a professional witness ready to go, and we turn up, and the prosecutor has a bit of a problem because their witness hasn't turned up. So they start frantically trying to work out where they are. This is the police officer who arrested me and did the field impairment test. And yeah, they were nowhere to be found. And then someone in the court said, "Oh, we do have a witness on video link, Umesh," and that threw the prosecution because they weren't aware that we'd secured the professional witness, even though they were emailed by the court the day before. But they weren't even aware we'd have a professional witness, and instead their witness was nowhere to be seen. So it gave him about 30 minutes, and then it turned out he was actually given the wrong date. It turns out it didn't matter anyway because the witness could only comment on the impairment charges, really. They couldn't comment on the Section 5A and the technicalities around using medicines past 30 days and post-expiry. So, yeah, it didn't matter anyway. But it wasn't a great start for the prosecution. And right from the onset, a judge said to the prosecution, from what I can see, you're asking the court to make an inference here that an offence has been committed, and you need to provide evidence to prove beyond all reasonable doubt that an offence has been committed. He said, "We'll hear it anyway. Let's see how it goes." And there were some questions to the prosecutor to begin with as well from the judge, and a point was made where around the expired medicine, he said that again, there's nothing in law to say that you can't use a medicine post expiry, and likened it to having milk that's a couple of days past its expiry date. And nothing illegal about using that milk. Just give it a little sniff and it's okay, chuck it in your coffee, he said. So and the prosecution couldn't provide any kind of laws that I could see to say that I'd broken any law. So questioned the prosecution as well around this. Where is the evidence that I can't use it past 30 days, etc., etc. And another key point as well was made that it's a PRN medicine used as and when needed. So it's not uncommon for the medicine to go beyond those 30 days if you're using it as and when needed. So those points were raised. And then I was being questioned by the prosecution, and he tried to raise different points that the prescription says 30 days. But again, it's what law is there to say you can't use it past 30 days? The prescription says that, yes, but that's guidance, not a law. And he also tried to raise other points as well, such as, is the medicine in the pots the cannabis that's prescribed to you, and the judge had to step in there and say, if there are concerns around that, you need to put in a bad character application. And furthermore, he said, if there were concerns around that, why was I given the medicine back at the police station? Why wasn't it confiscated and investigated further? So it wasn't going well for the prosecution. I didn't have anything to stand on really. And the judge wasn't very pleased from what I could tell either. And then we had Umesh join us in the court by video link, and I asked him questions. I asked him, is it common to use medicine past 30 days? And he explained if it's PRN, it's not uncommon to use them past 30 days. And again, I asked about expired medicines. And this was quite funny because he said, again, there's nothing that says you can't. It's more of a patient safety matter. And he likened it to having milk a couple of days past its expiry date. And the judges started laughing. Everyone was laughing at that point, apart from the prosecutor. I think that really drove home the point. There's nothing in the law around this. And its clinical guidance, and Umesh reaffirmed that point to the courtroom, which was brilliant. So yeah, after all of that, the prosecution had no evidence, and in fact, on the other hand, I had plenty of evidence to show that what I had done was not only lawful but actually common practice, particularly for medical cannabis, given its PRN. So the judge went away to deliberate and came back, and in summary, he said, the prosecution have raised a number of points, but in essence, there's no evidence. They've not provided any evidence for any offence, and as mentioned, I've shown that you can use medicines past 30 days, particularly if PRN, and you can use them post expiry too. So in the end, I won the appeal and was found not guilty. So yeah, it was really amazing to get that verdict after nearly 2 years from the initial arrest to finally get the not guilty. And yeah, big thanks again to Guy and Umesh for supporting me and providing the bundles and the professional evidence. But yeah, it's just unfortunate it had to take 2 years, 4 months of a driving ban. In fact, I'm still waiting to get my driving license back now. But yeah, hopefully, I think we can learn a lot from what's happened.
Thank you very much, Sal. That was really interesting. I do have one quick question before we move on. Are you getting your license back?
I will be getting my license back. Yes, I've just got to wait for the court to update the DVLA and all that bureaucracy to go through its motions. But yes, I will get it back soon enough.
That's good. That's really good to hear. Um, but yeah, that's a good demonstration of uh, the proceeds of justice and it working in the favor of patients, which is great. Um, I think what we can quickly run through is your interaction with the police, and how how that how that went. What is it was the first thing that you did? Um, I think you said you showed the prescription, you demonstrated all of that. So what would be your your recommendation, your suggestion from your experience?
I think well, the first thing I would probably want to say is that my experience is not a common one, although it does happen. I think it was because of the nature of the event I was at, and I think, the interaction did seem fairly positive from my end. Although, like I said, I was very nervous because I knew that there's a lot riding on this. There's still a lot of ignorance out there, which is improving, but you just never know how it's going to go. But yeah, like I said, I went through the breathalyzer. That was all okay. And I showed them my medication in its original packaging with the dispensing label. Um, Again, I don't think they really had any concerns around that. They gave it back. And yeah, so like I said, I think they just went hard because of the nature of the event is my guess, and I think it was quite a positive experience given the circumstances. It was, like I said, it was very unnerving. It was, having to go through hours in a cell, having bloods taken is never a pleasant experience. But again, hopefully, as awareness and guidance rolls out, again, that will improve because hopefully officers will become more aware of things like the medical defence and considerations for conditions when doing field impairment tests. So we'll just have to see. But yeah, I think it could have been a lot worse. I've had experiences where actually, straight into handcuffs, medicines confiscated and not returned. So yeah, it could have been a lot worse.
I mean, it's good to hear that you had somewhat of a decent interaction with the police. They weren't jumping on top of you and putting you in handcuffs and stuff like that. They were pretty patient and slow. I don't think everyone is fortunate enough to experience that. But uh, in terms of your impairment test, and just before I continue, actually, if anyone does have any questions, there is a Q&A section. If you're on the Instagram, there's a little speech bubble with a question mark. If you press that, you can put in your question. We'll go through that. And on YouTube, just above the chat, there should be a little bar for the Q&A. We'll go through the questions in just a moment. But running through the swab tests, like we know under the medical defense, the swab test, it doesn't really mean much. But why do you think officers do it? What should patients do in those scenarios as well if they were to ask for a swab?
Yeah, so again, to emphasise, you should never refuse the swab tests, and I think given the nature of the event, I think perhaps they would have wanted to have tested for cocaine, perhaps in that circumstance, or other substances. Obviously, the swab test can only pick up cannabis and cocaine. But I mean, there are quite a number of cases where the swab test is done purely because the patient has disclosed that they are prescribed cannabis, and I think in those circumstances it does seem quite a wasteful experience. Swab tests do cost money each time. I think they're around £20, and we've got 100,000 patients, many of those driving. If we keep swab testing them just because they're prescribed, it's going to be quite an unnecessary waste of money and also an unnecessary stress for patients too. So hopefully, again, if we can get that awareness up, the swab test will go down. But if you are driving impaired and they do suspect potentially other substances such as cocaine, there could be a valid reason to do the swab test. But for the most part, if you're a patient and there's no other problems, you're doing it, I feel.
I think one of the important things to address is that if anyone is to be asked that, they shouldn't refuse at all. Otherwise, you know, you'd be charged for refusing a sample. This includes a blood test as well. So if they do swab, and they might take you to the police station for further sampling, then that has to be conducted. It's quite unfortunate that has to be the case. Like you say, it's additional costs to the police, additional taxpayers' money being used. Um, but would it be recommended to ask for an impairment test instead, or is that something that would just be included, do you think?
I think the impairment test is an indicator of possible impairment. And I think, the majority of times, the police will probably pull you over for a reason. So perhaps they see you swerving about or something like that. Or it could even just be your tail light's gone out and you don't realise. But if they see something in your driving that suggests impairment, then perhaps that could be a good opportunity to do a field impairment test. But if it's another situation where there aren't signs of impairment, then it seems again unnecessary to put someone through a field impairment test just because they're prescribed medical cannabis if there's no other issues.
So, should we break down the impairment test that you conducted? I don't know if everyone's got a chance to see the video, but it's available on our YouTube channel and on Instagram as well. Just the impairment test that you've done and you conducted. You failed that test, I believe. Um, could you explain where is it that you failed? Um, what is it that you experienced? And why is it that you've got the result that you did? And what did the police do with those results?
Yeah, so there was a number of tests I had to do. The first one was a measure of my pupil size, where they had me facing a bright sun and then a bright torch painted into my eyes, and my pupils were shown to be 2 mil, and I think the accepted range is 3 to 6 mil. But I think the important thing to note there is that that's just showing if there's an indication for drugs in the system, which, I've already admitted to the fact that I'm going to have drugs in my system, my prescribed medicine. So, and that's just an indicator that they use. And then after that, there was a few other tests. I can't remember in order or what they were, but there was walk in a straight line, which that one was quite unpleasant because I had to put my feet front and back together right at the beginning, and then wait for the officer to explain the instructions, which was quite uncomfortable. And then, as I said, with the nerves and the shakes when I was doing that, I was a bit swayy and it didn't go great. There was another test as well where you have to count and touch your nose, I believe, and I don't think I counted correctly. Again, I was just quite stressed in the situation, and I misinterpreted their instructions slightly there. So yeah, it wasn't amazing, and in the officer's judgment, that did suggest I was impaired, which was unfortunate, but and again, at the beginning of each question, they do ask as well, are there any kind of conditions or disabilities that may affect your ability to do these tests? And I did explain about my anxiety. But as we heard in court, the officer wasn't trained or qualified to comment on whether anxiety could impact on a field impairment test. And that could be a potential area of concern too, really, because if we do have these police officers who can't comment on how a disability would impact on a field impairment test, does that mean everyone who does a field impairment test, which is impacted by a condition or disability, has to go through court to show that that's the case? Again, that doesn't seem like the right way to do things for me.
Yeah, that's a really good point because my follow-up question was going to be, what if a patient was unable to conduct um, any of those tests that you've mentioned, whether it's the walking one, they have physical mobility, they can't walk, as you say, the nerves, anxiety, um, that affecting the thing. What would happen in those scenarios, do you think? Would they be asked to conduct it anyway, or would it be excused, and would the impairment test be conducted a little bit differently, or as you mentioned, would it be just sent to court?
Again, I think it's a bit of a postcode lottery, really, because every force, every CPS does things differently. I mean, I think there's some cases where it'd be pretty obvious that they wouldn't be able to do the test. For example, walk in a straight line. If you can't walk, then you're not going to be able to do that test. But even in less obvious examples like that, they should consider your condition, visible or otherwise, and how that could impact it. If they're not qualified to make an assessment on that, they can make a note of what you say and how your disability will impact the test. But if they're not qualified to comment on it, then and their judgment is that there is impairment, then there is a chance that they'll want to let the courts decide if you're impaired because of the medicine or not, and not take that risk at the roadside.
So, one last question before we move on to the questions that everyone else has. Um, what would you recommend or suggest people prepare themselves with when it comes to going to court if they were ever put to court, or if they were arrested, they went through this procedure and they're waiting for CPS? What would you recommend people could prepare themselves with just to reassure them and feel a bit more confident moving forward?
I think for the most part, patients should be all right in the driving situation because, like I said, the field impairment test isn't common. It does happen, and that can cause problems for patients in terms of increasing the likelihood it will have to go to court to play out, which again is a bit of a shame. But I think generally to prepare themselves, I think as long as patients have the documentation from the clinic that shows that they can use the medication, there's other documents available too, which we were going to put together to bundles, especially following this case. I think there'll be information that might be helpful to others if they're using their medicines after 30 days or post expiry. But yeah, I think for the most part, just showing that clinical evidence that you can use the medicine is the most important thing because at the end of the day, the prosecution do need to prove beyond reasonable doubt that either your use of the medicine wasn't lawful and therefore you can't raise the statutory medical defence, or if they're going for impairment, that your impairment was due to the medical cannabis specifically and no other reason. And again, as I've learned the hard way, even at the magistrates, it might not go the way it should do, but just keep fighting because patients shouldn't be put into situations where they're criminalised when they've done nothing wrong. And I know it's not never an easy situation to be in, but the law is on your side if you're not driving whilst impaired and you're legitimately prescribed, then why should there be any problems?
That's great. No, I appreciate all the information there, Sal. I believe that's really helpful. I think what we can do now is see if people have questions for us. What I'll do is I'll go through questions that we've got on Instagram because we haven't got anything at the moment on YouTube. We've got some people in the chat though. Thank you everyone for putting in your comments. So first question we have, great session guys. Can you clarify consumption of medicine passes best before? Is it still considered legal? I think you did touch on this, but if you wanted to quickly clarify.
Yeah, so just to clarify, yeah, so using your medicine post expiry is legal and it's more of a patient safety matter. But if you do obviously notice anything concerns with the medicine, or if you're told by your prescribing clinician or pharmacist not to use it post expiry, then you shouldn't do so. But it's again, it's a clinical guidance and patient safety issue, not a legal one.
And would you say it's dangerous to drive while under the influence of medical cannabis? And I'll add another question with that as well, is how long after consuming can you drive?
Yes, they're great questions. So driving under the influence, I mean, that generally people perceive that as driving whilst impaired. So I think driving with cannabis in your system isn't a problem if you're a patient, provided you're not impaired. And I think for many patients, actually, if they don't have their medicine, they're going to be a worse driver because they're impacted by their condition. Whereas if they're using their medicine as they need to, they can just fully on the road and be a safer driver. In terms of how long after using the medicine until you should drive, again, there's no clear-cut answer around that. Unless you're specifically told otherwise by your prescribing doctor, it's down to kind of individual judgment. If you don't feel impaired, then yeah, there is no specified time frame. And again, it's very unique because patients may be on different medicines. Some may be on a CBD strain, which they could straight before driving without impairment. Others could be the same with THC, where they don't get impairment. So if you, again, it's so individual. But just the key point is, if you're impaired, don't drive. Otherwise, you're good to go.
That's great. Thank you for that. And one question here we have is, I mean, if you'd like to answer this question, obviously, what was the level they found in your blood when they tested you?
So it was quite low actually. I was quite surprised. It was 3.6 micrograms. So the legal limit is 2 micrograms. So it was just under double that, which is very low, but still enough for them to prosecute.
Interesting. That's interesting. I'm just going to quickly check if we have any other questions here. No, we have no more questions here. But if anyone does have any more questions, they can always reach out to us, drop us a message. Um, yeah, you can drop us an email, drop us a message. We'll try and help you as best as we can. Um, in terms of the information that you've just heard today, we'll hopefully put together a full report on what Sal experienced and a breakdown of the tests that will run, the outcome of the case, and recommendations for you guys on ways that you can better prepare yourselves if this situation ever comes up, or if you're going through a court case yourself. Um, do have one more question just come in. Um, if the impairment test is not done, how does the court determine that you are impaired? That's a really good question.
I think it would have to look at other factors. So again, if they observed you driving and driving appeared impaired, then that could be something to explore. But again, they need to show that impairment was due to the medication itself and not another reason.
Yeah, I think most of that is done through observation. Impairments can only be tested through observation, and there's various methods. Um, so if anyone has any questions, I'm just going over the chat. I see good vibes there. We are reading the chat. Thank you, Farhan, as well, and the High Gardener. Thank you, everyone who's joined in too. Um, I think we've asked that question already. Yeah, I think that's it really. It's the time now. I mean, we're just 15 minutes early. Um, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else, Sal, if there's any other points you want to add.
Um, no, I suppose I just want to emphasize again, although this has been quite a very negative experience, and I've been through quite a lot. And there are a number of patients who've been through very negative experiences around this too. Most of the time, patients do drive, they complete their journeys, and they don't have any issues. I think if driving with medical cannabis was this big problem, we'd be hearing news reports all the time of this driver crashed while on medical cannabis, or this driver was arrested on medical cannabis. But we just don't, and yeah, it does happen. We can't deny that, but hopefully, again, with the kind of new guidance that's being developed and the work we're doing nationally, that we can try and improve things.
That's a really good point. I see someone saying, "Would you really like to would really like to share some information on this?" Like I said, if you could drop us an email, we'll definitely be in touch. We can definitely work together on providing some more information on this as much as we can, the better. I think I do have a question on YouTube. Um, How long after consuming cannabis will one be able to pass a swab test, given we have CB1, CB2 receptors that cannabinoid can bind to? I don't think it's possible to ever pass swab test as a regular user.
No, I think you're right there. As patients, particularly if you use THC cannabis products every day, chances are you will always show positive, even if you stop using it for a few days or even longer. You'll probably show positive, which again is why I think it's not really necessary with a prescribed patient if they don't suspect cocaine and they're doing it just because you've said you've got medical cannabis prescription. It just seems completely pointless.
Mhm. That's a really good point. I think in terms of questions, and I really appreciate everyone that's putting a question as well. It's really important that we can uh, digest this a lot easier for everyone. I think I might have one more question. When you went to court, did you pay for a solicitor to defend you?
No, I didn't. So unfortunately, I couldn't get legal aid. I think the majority of people struggle to get that because it's not an imprisonable offence. And paying myself was just too unaffordable. But unfortunately, I did have the support of Guy Coxall, and I was a litigant in person. I represented myself at the magistrates, was found guilty, did the same again at the Crown, and was found not guilty. So all without a solicitor. And I did, like I said, I reached out to quite a few. I even had some top, cannabis lawyers basically saying, you've not really got a chance without a solicitor, and that it's highly likely you'll be found guilty because it's past 2 months. But managed to do it on my own. So uh, because the law is pretty black and white, the prosecution need to prove beyond reasonable doubt that you're committing an offence, and if they can't do that, then you're not guilty.
It's really good, and well done on doing that yourself. And really big thank you to Guy, of course, for his support, being there to help. Um, for many, he's not going to be available, unfortunately, because he's gone into retirement. So that help might not be available to everyone, but his information is out there. He's got information regarding driving, um, and yeah, it's always good to have someone like that in the community. But it's sad to see him go. But yeah, thank you very much. Um, I'm going to check for any more questions. I think we are good. There's nothing else that I have to add. Thank you everyone for joining in. I think we will leave it at that, but we will definitely share some more information soon, later on down the line. We'll get some more information regarding um, medical cannabis and drug driving, so we can provide some reassuring information for everyone so they're better prepared in this situation, in this scenario. And at the same time, we're also working in the background, working with police to try and educate, inform them, and ensure that there's consistent training across the board, and there's you know their actions align with what patients need. So yeah, really appreciate you guys, and yeah, we'll be at the event that High Garden has popped in next week, Friday. You'll be able to see Sal there as well. So if anyone has any questions, reach out to him at the event there. So looking forward to that one. But yeah, really appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much, and I look forward to speak to you guys soon. Thank you, Sal.
Thanks all. It's been great. Take care all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.